For today's project we're going to be making a fire pit, and we are going to make one out of one of these. This is a cheap LED candle and that's what it does. Make sure that you get basically the cheapest possible ones you can, because we are going to be essentially destroying it just to get the guts out of it. Now, I've done a project like this in one of my long form videos on a much larger scale. Now we are going to the smallest scale possible using pretty much exactly the same techniques. So, the first thing that we need to do is to disassemble it. Now, thankfully, this one does come apart pretty easily, and when we have a look at the inside, basically what we have is the LED there, and a switch mechanism and a battery holder. Okay, technical stuff. LEDs can only work in one direction. So, there are two legs coming off the LED. I've had a look at this one, and the way that they have it is that the one wire leg of the LED presses on the top of a button battery, and then the other leg goes into a switch, and the switch brushes it against the side of the button battery, which is the other terminal, and that's what makes it turn on and off. Now, that unfortunately for our scale is a wee bit too high, so what we need to do is get it much lower, and that's where we start basically ripping it apart. Now, I want the battery out, and because it only works in one direction, we are going to specifically mark one leg and then leave a note: red to switch. Alright. So yeah, as I said, that's one leg of the LED, and the other leg is going into the switch, and you can see it just there where moving it just brushes it against it. Alright, I'll disassemble this completely. Alright, so that's disassembled. Now, what I am going to do... Right, I'm just looking at the plastic parts. Now, the first thing that I can do is shave down that switch. There's some little sort of stand legs. I can bring those down a little bit. That will save us a couple of mil. But I can't bring them too far down because there is that sort of lip for the battery cover, and I do need to leave an allowance for that. This is surplus to requirements completely. But one thing that part did do was keep a cover on the switch so that it could remain in place. Without it, it just falls out. So I'm going to have to do a new sort of keepy downy bit. I'm also going to take most of this away so that we can get our LED far closer to the ground. And I'm also going to grind down the plastic on this LED because it's not actually necessary. All you've got to do is make sure that you don't get onto those inside metal parts. So I will probably take the top off there, and I may even grind the sides down and see how that works. So I will get on with that, and I'll show you what I've done. Just to show you what I've done, I have, and this took quite a while, ground down completely the top of that LED, and I've ground the sides down as well. And I've also put like little, I guess you would call them facets, like a diamond around, and that will help diffuse the light in more of a sort of umbrella pattern. I've also had a really good go at this. That switch got ground down, the legs got ground down, the top is gone. Any uprights I've ground down as well, just to get that profile as low as possible. Now, what I do need to do now is attach a piece of plastic over the top of the switch, otherwise it's just going to pop out. And I also want to protect it because we're going to be covering this lot in hot glue. So I will get on with doing that, and I will remount the LED. And what I'm going to do is I am going to use a blob of hot glue to get that back in place. I'll have to cut the legs down, and I'll get that remounted into the switch, and then we'll carry on with the next part. Right, just to show where we are at. We've managed to get it ground down so that it is now around about that height, which is far better a profile. I have used a bit of hot glue to secure the LED in there, and I've reattached the battery. I've also added reinforcing over the switch just to hold that in place, and we can see that it works. So now I have a tissue, and I'm going to use that as essentially a temporary base, and what we are going to do is use some stones to build up around the edge, and I'm just going to use hot glue for this. Put a spot of hot glue there, and then get a nice big upright stone to cover that in, and I'm going to work around just adding stones onto it so that the stones are holding the fire in place. And I'm using tissue paper basically so that I can just tear it away because it's not going to be needed in the final model. So I've got the perimeter stones done, so that now tells me what area I can work on inside. Now, before I start applying any hot glue, and essentially I'm going to be covering it in hot glue, I need to be aware of the fact that there are some movable parts. Obviously there is the clip for the battery, and I don't want to glue that in place, and there is this slide for the switch. I don't want that glued in place. So what I'm going to do is get some bits of tin foil, and I am going to glue those over basically so that I can put hot glue on top, but it's not going to impede those things. And I'm going to make sure that I put it shiny side up, because shiny will reflect any light back up and out of the piece. So I'll get on with that. And now that that's done, it's time to start packing this out with hot glue. And I'm just going to make sure that I do get it all the way around the edges first, and just go gently on those areas of silver paper. Glue is all nice and set, and as it was drying I just used the hot end of the glue gun just to press into it and sort of rough the surface up, because we don't want it that flat and even. Now it's time for a little bit of a tidy up. Obviously we've got some hot glue around the edges, plus the remnants of the paper that I pulled off earlier. So use either a knife or pliers or snips and just tidy those up. And you do want to rough that surface up, like I say, so again use your knife or your snips. And we're going to break it down. We don't want a flat surface, because we do want something that'll take a nice dry brush, because we are practically finished and it's going to be painting after that tidy up's done. On to painting. Now I'm just using an old ratty brush here because there's going to be a lot of stippling. First colour is blood red, and I don't want a huge amount on there. I'm basically just going to give it a dab all the way in random bits over the model. That's that one done. Now next colour is black, and we want to be a wee bit more careful with this because we are starting to build up the ash layer or burnt material, and we want it all the way around kind of the outside of the model. Obviously because light will shine through it, you don't have to be 100% neat, but we are just going for that border around the edge. And once you've got that border done, let's just have a bit of a dry brush all over the model like that. Stipple it a little bit if you want, and then leave that to dry. If you have still got some glue sort of showing around the edges, you may want to do just a little bit of a border with either black or grey. It's entirely up to you. Then our very last coat, we're just going to have a wee dusting of grey, and again we're just going to pick out around the edges just to give that impression of sort of like an ash build up there, and then just a wee flick across the raised areas. And that is it done and ready to be lit up. There you go. And if that little campfire doesn't warm your heart enough to subscribe to this channel, I don't know what will. However, never fear, I will see you tomorrow for another video. Bye for now.